What's going on, Soul Tribe? I salute the divinity in you, and welcome to my channel, Alchemist. Justin here, and are you ready? It's eclipse time. Yes, we have the eclipse that's going to be happening this week. This week is a bit of a mixed bag. It kind of starts off kind of neutral. We get a little bit of green towards the middle of it, but then once we get to that eclipse, those are usually big indicators of something that is going to be happening, especially when we're talking with the lunar eclipse. There's going to be the kind of bigger endings that are going to be happening in this kind of area of our chart, and even on a sort of like a global sense. But we'll get into all that here in a moment. But if you're new here, again, my name is Justin, and one of the things that I do in this channel is talk about the lunar shenanigans, and it just talks about the astrology of the moon, what sign it's in, what phase it's in, when it happens to go void of course, and just to get a general feel of the week and see what conversations the moon's going to be happening to see, because the moon's so closely tied in with us, and it controls really the populace. So it's really good to kind of get an eyes on how the moon's moving, considering how fast it moves. And I'm going to be covering the week of, let me go ahead and shift over here. I'm going to be covering the week of September 2nd through the 8th. And let's go ahead and get into this thing here. Because as we get in here on a Tuesday, the 2nd of September, Moon's chilling in Capricorn. It's sign of its detriment, but the kind of nice thing that's happening here, it's really kind of nice conversation. The Moon is in reception with Saturn. Saturn's in reception with Jupiter, and Jupiter's in reception with the Moon, because they're all in each other's domicile here. So there's really kind of nice conversation that's happening here. And on top of that, the Moon, is waxing, it's building in light, and it's forming a trine with the Sun here. And this is happening in Earth energy. So this is a very practical trine. The trines are very supportive. They're when the planets are 120 degrees apart. So we have here like elements here of Virgo and Capricorn. And the Sun is in the overcoming position in this one. So for me, this would be a great time, for example, if you've been feeling out of, especially with these energies building up here, with this moon, this doesn't have to be where just life has to just shake things up. This could be where you're making some kind of conscious decision where, what, I think I'm going to end, maybe cutting down on sweets out of my diet, or I'm going to maybe change to doing this, or maybe I'm going to start doing start up a new routine, or, I'm letting this out of my life. But this could be a great time with the Sun. I think when there's ever a conversation with the Sun and the Moon, especially in this instance, to explore that brighter side of you with the Sun, the side of you that wants to be seen, to be recognized, that higher sense of oneself, that soul calling, that true will, and to really feel that in a very, again, in an earthly way, a very practical way in this. So this could be taking, cutting out some sort of like habit that's coming through, dealing with some sort of vice, having healthier, boundaries and things in relationships, whatever this might look like there. That would be how I would work with this kind of this trine energy starting up there, because it's not too bad. I think that what this energy starting up this week. And then we get into Wednesday, the 3rd of September. Moon's still chilling in Cap, but now we have Mars in the mix, and Mars in this instance is overcoming the moon, in Libra here. Now, Mars is kind of tamed down, or kind of toned down a little bit, considering that Jupiter's kind of overcoming it. Venus is incomer, so it's got reception with Venus, and that's actually starting to improve there. But something I also want you to bring to your attention there, and I talk about this a little bit more in the Celestial News Weekly, but Jupiter and Mars are coming up on a square as well. And the fact that the moon is forming an aspect with both of them as that application is building, there may be some tensions there, because the squares are when the planets are 90 degrees apart from each other, as you see Mars and the moon are. And in this instance, Mars, there may be some sort of frustration, some sort of thing that's keeping you stagnant. And if we're talking about Libra, this is air energy. So maybe there's something where it's like, you want to start this thing, but then like doubts kick in, like, oh, I can't do this. It's amazing sometimes what the mind how it can trick us out. We can talk ourselves out of things sometimes into taking sort of actions and stuff there. So, I think with this, even though that there is this tension with Mars, there's still an opportunity for growth here with Jupiter, and so that's going to be happening at about 18 degrees and 19 minutes of Capricorn. And, even with that opposition is where the planets are 120, or excuse me, where they're in opposite signs, as you can see here. And what may be happening there is just like we're feeling that pressure of Mars, but we're still having to try to look at the brighter sides of things with Jupiter to know that whatever this thing is that we're kind of moving through is for our expansion. It's for the growth there. There is some sort of there's a point to this. I think with this kind of Jupiter kind of opposing the moon there, but it may be a challenge between trying to see that bright side, but also dealing with just the feelings of the moon. And the moon's in an Earth sign right now. It's under the auspices of Saturn, where that's nice. It's a bit colder than the moon's used to working in. The moon likes kicking in like Taurus. So that's something to think about with this kind of aspect here. And, speaking of while we're working with Saturn, right before the moon moves into Aquarius, the moon is going to form a sextile with Saturn. And so this is an opportunity where the moon's going to be overcoming Saturn. So it's just like, are we going to, this can be an opportunity with the sextile, because the sextile, when the planets are 60 degrees apart from one another, and there is an opportunity for solving problems for creative problem solving and things like that. Opportunities are another thing that opens up with the sextile. So this could be where it's like, okay, are we going to let these themes of maybe that martial stuff exacerbate us, or are we going to take those emotions and put them into, put them to use in Capricorn, put them to like, okay, you know what, I'm going to take these, maybe we're feeling frustrated around, again, maybe themes in a relationship, or it's like, let's have a conversation about this, not where we're like yelling, where it's like, hey, I want this to be improve in our things, I want this to be better, blah, 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 kind of come at it in a real kind of constructive way there. And then the moon will move into Aquarius. And now look at that, then we're getting into, and that's going to happen at about 3:31 a.m. and that's going to be Pacific time. And when the moon's in Aquarius, now we're getting more cerebral. The moon's again feeling a little bit, and now it kind of loses that reception with Saturn. So now it is feeling a little bit cooler. When the moon is in Aquarius there. I like to think with Aquarius, you want to be mindful of where your thoughts are at and how that's affecting your, how the emotions are influencing the thoughts. Because I find with Aquarius, they're ones that, they're fixed air. So if you can hold it in your head, you can hold it in your hand. That stuff will pull, you can maybe attract those things. So, I think sometimes with Aquarius, it could be like a self-fulfilling prophecy that happens. So that's something to be mindful of with the moon there. But otherwise, the moon now that it's entered into Aquarius, now we get a little bit of green here. On Friday, the 5th of September, the moon first is going to form an opposition with Venus. So we love that. Again, any sort of conversation with the benefics is better than nothing. And this could be where it's like, okay, you've been feeling these challenges. So now again, like with Venus dealing with relationships, now it's like, okay, I can have that conversation with such and such. Or maybe there's something that you want to change in your job. So it's like, what, I want to, move to this field. So let me start connecting with people in this thing. And then that moon forms a trine with with Mars. That's going to happen about 19 degrees in 5 minutes. And so then you're able to take the challenges of Mars, and then now it feels a little bit easier, and things will maybe even move faster when we have some help, when we're thinking about with Venus. And that may be something with the challenge with the opposition again, where it's like how to, maybe the emotions are thinking like, oh, I don't want, I want to be able to solve this myself, I don't need any kind of help, that moon in Aquarius. But Venus is like, what, if you just ask, people are ready. People are ready to give. The Venus is in Leo, it's ready to give. It's like, yes. Absolutely. Let's problem solve. Let's get this thing. And you could be surprised, and it could just be a matter of getting over oneself. So that's something that I think could really kind of be really nice about this day. And that kind of carries over into Saturday. It's which is going to be the 6th of September. So no, right before the moon's going to enter pretty early, so we kind of carry that energy throughout the day, and then the moon moves into Pisces, and then that's going to happen at about 8:54 a.m. and again that's Pacific time, and now we're right within the range of the eclipse that's going to be happening here soon. This is going to be one where, let's go ahead and move over to the slide. Well, before I talk about that. Now let's go ahead and move over to the slide. Let's talk about this. Let's get into it. Because Sunday, the 7th of September, that's when the eclipse is going to be going down. And it's going to be a total lunar eclipse. Now, this won't be visible for everybody. This is going to be happening at about 11:08 11:08 a.m. Pacific time, so I'm not gonna be able to see it. But a lot of the areas that's specifically gonna see it, and I'm gonna attach a link, and I do this on all the eclipse videos, but I put a link for this website. It's timeanddate.com, and it'll show you the eclipses, which area is going to have the most visibility. And this is going to be most visible over like pretty much over like China. Let me kind of increase it. Yeah, China, India, Pakistan, like all in that sort of like area, sort of like Africa. Yeah, definitely in, yeah, good. You could see that some in Europe it starts to lose visibility, but definitely more kind of concentrated. Russia, kind of in that area, a little bit of Japan, things like that, Mongolia, Kazakhstan. So, yeah, I'll include a link for that as well, so you can definitely check that out. And that may be something to kind of pay attention to. If there's any sort of like, especially there's always some sort of like things that are going on when the eclipse happens. So, seeing what comes on, maybe even especially in those kind of areas, maybe there's some kind of news thing that happens there if that's something you follows. But first off, it starts off with a little bit of tension. This is a mixed bag here because the moon forms an opposition with Mercury. So it's like, what's going on? And trying to make it sense. The eclipse energy is ramping up. So now we're just trying to make sense of the emotions are feeling some type of way. Mercury is strong here in Virgo, so I like that. I think that there is an opportunity. Both of them are in pretty good shape overall. Again, now the kind of nice thing I think about this eclipse, I think starting out it's maybe a little rough. Again, we can start considering that Mars and Jupiter were square one another, but now that it's starting to separate, it's still really close. So I think that there will be, because sometimes with Mars, I know Uranus gets a lot of the shock factor, but if you've ever seen Mars, I remember the first time that I saw Mars, and that's what I've experienced. It was this sense of shock because it was just like, oh, like you're visibly red thing in the sky. And I think that can be something kind of startling, with Mars, and then trying to justify it, I think with Mars in Libra. So that would be something that I'd kind of pay attention to. But the moon and Mercury, they're trying to make sense of what's what's kind of going on here. And then shortly after, the eclipse and the full moon are going to be happening about at 11:08. And the moon will be opposed to the sun. And now this is like, okay, we were talking about being in that sense of alignment when the moon was trine the sun, but now we're really kind of seeing the full picture here, and the full picture has a blemish on it. There's something different about this energy, again, when we're dealing with the moon, and that's something where if you are able to see that, depending on how you feel about, watching of eclipse, I have a picture of an eclipse. There's going to be one that's happening, I think, in like March, March next year that I'm looking out for, that's going to be more visible in our area. So, however you feel about that, but it is an interesting thing to observe when you see the moon having that redness, and the moon does a lot anyway. If you ever just watch on a regular basis, the moon's changing colors all the time, but it is different when you have that kind of redness when the luminaries are doing stuff, and when they're doing things that are out of the norm, and so visibly so. This is happening within 3 degrees of the node. So the closer that the full moon or new moon happens, the more, more stark, that eclipse is. So something potent's kind of cooking up here. But the nice thing I think to mention, though, with this is that it's not just all shocks and surprises and things, because there is some niceness that's going on there, because now the moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception one another, and they're within a trine with one another, so and the moon is applying to Jupiter. So I think there's both of them, both the luminaries are applying to Jupiter. So I think that there's something to be said there with that. The moon's overcoming Jupiter, so it's a matter of, again, managing, I think, the not controlling the emotions, but like being able to feel through what's happening, to be able to feel through like, okay, there was maybe a bit of a rockiness, but there's a point at the end of this. Jupiter's trying to give something with this, and it's been hard, I think, for Jupiter to try to give. It's in such a great place, but it's been under, it's under that square from Saturn for a while. It's been in this square with Mars, so its beneficence has been tested for sure, and I think that I think we need to give ourselves a moment of really give a testament to really be trying to navigate these waters, because it's been a lot. August was it was something, and September's just as active. So I think that's just something to think about with this, because then we get to Monday. then it's Monday, the 8th of September, and before the moon moves out of Pisces, it's going to form a conjunction with Saturn, and so that's it's a hard aspect with Saturn, and I think that's where it's coming down to, again, being able to move through these emotions, to be able to feel through this, to give yourself the space to, and understand that if other people's need the space for it, have it, whatever, because this is a time that, especially when we have bigger things happening, it's a lot, to process. And now the moon is starting to lose light, as we start to get towards the waning gibbous phase. And so, the dust, this is where the dust starts to settle. And then it's like, okay, life, even though all this craziness maybe be going on, Saturn's like, there's still everyday stuff to do. So you still got bills to pay, you still got food to get, you still got all the things to do, and where, it's like and Saturn says that in Pisces with all the compassion, but it's still Saturn, and it doesn't make it easy, and I think that that's a reminder with all of this stuff here, especially as the moon moves from Pisces into Aries. That's going to happen at about 11:37 a.m. and again, that's Pacific time. And so, as the moon moves out of this, going through this kind of tumultuous thing, it's just like remembering with Aries to keep moving forward. I think that's a nice little kind of reminder there, kind of nice little ending for the moon to kind of end on, to give us, as we kind of navigate through this stuff. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that when we get to that. But, I think that the challenge will be, as the moon moves into Aries, it's just like how to move forward, because and I think that there's a reminder here that we're not in this alone. We're all feeling these energies at varying degrees, of course, and it's going to depend on, as we move through that. We went through Capricorn, we went through the cardinal signs with Capricorn. So we got cardinal placements, and then Aquarius, the fixed signs were activated. This is a particular time, I would pay attention to if you have any sort of mutable placements, especially around that eclipse. That would be Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, or Sagittarius. If you have any points around that, what degree was that at? And I don't think I mentioned that the degree for the eclipse is going to be happening at 15 degrees and 22 minutes of Pisces. So if you have anything around 15 minutes, that would be something to keep an eye on. That would be, that was working I'm actually thinking of someone in particular I need to talk with. So, that's it. It's just something, but it's just something to think about, just to be aware of in your chart and to pay attention to what you're feeling through as you're kind of going through that. So again, interesting energies we're moving through. Busy week. Definitely busy week whenever we're getting to eclipses. And then we're going to be, this is just the first one. We got another one that's going to be happening towards the 21st. So we got one more, but this is going to be bigger beginning. So just something to think about as we kind of move through this thing. But yeah, that's all I got for you there. And if this is something where if you need help kind of navigating these waters, just seeing how these things may be activating in your chart, want to explore your natal chart more, or maybe there's some elections that you want to do, whether it's planning a trip or, a wedding, signing a contract, things along those lines. Down in the description box, there's a link to book a consultation with me. And if you have any questions about the services that I provide, my email's down there as well, so definitely feel free to reach out to me. Also, there's a link down there for the Celestial News Weekly, which talks about the sun and the other classical planets, where they're transiting, what signs are going to be most affected, and how to most practically work with those energies. And how I've split this up is that I'll talk about the lunar eclipses on Lunar Shenanigans, and then the solar eclipses on the Celestial News Weekly, respectively. So that way that kind of splits that up there a little bit. So the next eclipse I'll be talking about on Celestial News Weekly, which again I think happens on the 21st of September. But also I do been doing these series where I have these videos of different celestial bodies and different signs in different houses and my thoughts on them and some things to think about when you're working with those placements. So that's also available for you if you want to check that out there. The whole little library for you. They're all listed by playlist. But that's all I got for you there. So stay mindful out there navigating those eclipses. Keep eyes on that moon. Always up to something. And I will catch you on the next one, Monday.